Hello everyone, thank you for taking the time to visit my channel. I know you are looking for a story to relax, to gently fall asleep, and I will help you do that. But first, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to always receive mysterious and fascinating stories every night. And if you have any thoughts or questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment below the video. I'd love to hear from you. Together, we will create a strong and energetic community. Today, I want to tell you about an old house, secluded on top of Barren Hill, where I went to find peace, a place that helped me focus on my research work. No one lived nearby, only cold winds blew and birds sang in the distance. At first, I thought this would be an ideal place to complete a book about the strange phenomena I was researching. Whispers in the walls. I don't care about the age of the house or the cracks in the foundation, and I don't care about the peeling paint on the walls. All I need is a quiet space. But this house seemed to have a purpose of its own, and I would soon realize that what I thought was peaceful hid something very different. I arrived at the house late in the afternoon, the weak light of sunset gradually disappearing behind heavy clouds. The wind from the hill blew strongly against me when I opened the car door, bringing with it a breeze of cold air that seemed to invite me to step in. The rough road leading to the entrance of the house looked as if it hadn't been cared for in years. The surrounding landscape was wild and deserted, and the house looked like an ancient creature staring at me from afar. Standing in front of the door, I felt the coldness of this place. The walls were cracked, the porch was tilted, and the windows were old, some boarded up. I can't help but think about the solitude that home brings. But I don't mind, because I just came here to find peace. I took a deep breath and entered. At first, I didn't feel anything unusual. Although the house is old, it still retains the classic beauty of old houses. I turned the old lock on the door and entered. Inside, a musty and dusty atmosphere pervades, as if the house had been closed for decades. The weak light from the windows obscured by dust makes the space even more gloomy and strange. I told myself that this was just an old place in need of repair, and I wouldn't let my insecurities take over. As soon as I entered, I started exploring the rooms. The living room, located right near the door, was empty and had a feeling of long neglect. Old tables and chairs and a small chandelier radiate dim light. Next to it is the dining room, dark and cramped. I stopped for a moment, looked around, then decided to bring my luggage in and start cleaning up. The lights in the room were on, but occasionally flickered as if the electrical system was too old. I tried not to pay attention to the small noises, thinking it was from the wind blowing through the gaps. But then, a soft whisper came from the wall behind me. At first, I thought it was just the sound of the wind outside, but after a few seconds, I realized that the sound was something unusual. It was like a breathing sound, faint but clear. I tried to shake off the feeling of anxiety, telling myself that it was just my imagination, and continued working. I can't deny that something strange is going on. Every time I stood still, the whispering appeared again, and this time, I started to hear unclear words. A feeling of insecurity gradually rose within me. I turned around and saw nothing, but in this quiet space, I felt like something was watching me, lurking in the darkness. Every little noise, every gust of wind, startled me. After packing my luggage, I decided to go to the second floor to find a more comfortable place to work. The long hallway leads to the bedrooms, and the closed doors create a dim, cold space. One of the rooms had a broken bed and old chairs stacked in the corner. I chose the room at the end of the hallway. Large windows opened onto a desolate landscape, with hills of dry grass and rocks covered. I felt absolute tranquility, and even though it wasn't an ideal scene, I still felt it had its own beauty. I placed my laptop on the desk under the window, and started composing notes for my research book. This feeling of peace faded further as the whispering returned, clearer this time, and almost as if it were talking to me from the wall. I couldn't understand it all, but there were a few words that sounded like my name. A strange feeling rose within me, as if this house was testing me. I told myself that I needed to relax and not let fear control me. But the whispering continued, unceasing, and seemed to grow louder and louder. I pulled the blanket up to my neck, trying to hide my fear, but I couldn't help but feel the presence of something within these walls. I don't know what it is, but I know one thing for sure: this house is not as simple as it looks. Night came, and the house was silent. The whispering stopped, but the feeling of insecurity did not disappear. Instead, it was like a gentle wave passing through my body, invisible, but always present. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard strange sounds. The creaking of the wooden floor underfoot, the sound of light breathing like a passing breeze, and even light footsteps that I couldn't explain. But what made me feel strangest was the feeling that I was not alone. All night long I couldn't sleep well. Strange dreams began to invade my mind. I dreamed that I was lost in the endless corridors of the house, with closed doors all around. The cracks in the wall were like eyes staring at me, and I could hear whispers from behind, unintelligible, but clearly they were calling me. When I woke up the next morning, it felt like I hadn't slept all night. My mind is heavy and hazy. Even though there were no obvious sounds at that time, I still felt an uncomfortable presence around me, as if someone was watching my every move. I tried to focus on work, trying to banish those strange thoughts from my head. I turned on the computer, but the words on the screen seemed blurred, unable to help me concentrate. Every time I looked up, I saw the faint outline of furniture in the room, and occasionally, a gentle breeze blew past, causing the windows to creak. Every little sound startled me, even though I tried not to pay attention to it. When I decided to find a way to relieve myself by exploring the house, I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. I walked along the empty rooms, old bedrooms, each room containing a silent story that this house carries within itself. Every step on the wooden floor creaked, but there seemed to be a different silence covering everything. I couldn't understand it, but I felt like I was walking on a thin shell of ice, where any movement could shatter everything. Finally, I decided to open the door to a room upstairs that I hadn't explored before. This room had an old broken bed, a few moldy chairs, and a stained carpet in the middle of the room. The room looked as if it had been abandoned for a long time. But when I entered, I felt something strange. The wall on the left had long cracks, like scratches, and I couldn't help but feel that they were moving, if only a little. I turned around and looked towards the window, where the dim light of the afternoon filtered through the dirty glass. I couldn't explain the uncomfortable feeling rising in my chest. But then, a sound rang out, soft, but clear. I turned around, the flashlight's light shining straight into the wall. The cracks in the wall seemed to move, like they were expanding and stretching. Suddenly, I heard the whisper again. This time, the sound was not just soft anymore but seemed to be growing louder. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, my hands began to tremble. I can't bear it anymore. I turned around, rushed out of the room, closed the door and stood panting in the hallway. My heart was beating like it was about to burst. I can't understand why this house makes me feel this way. But when I returned to my room, those whispers continued, this time clearer, as if calling me. I can't bear it anymore. I know I can't ignore them forever. I decided to explore the house, even though I knew I would face things I couldn't explain. Since the whispers started coming back, I can't concentrate on work anymore. I felt a strange pull, as if this house was pulling me down a path from which I couldn't escape. It felt like an urge, as if these walls were not just a place that contained stale air, but also a place to hide secrets that I could not yet fully understand. One night, after failing to sleep, I decided to explore further. The cracks in the wall seemed to be stirring and expanding in a strange way, as if they were alive, moving. My heart pounded loudly in my chest as I walked down the dark hallway, the flashlight in my hand only illuminating the old walls, sometimes shining on strange signs that I couldn't explain. I stopped at a room I had never been in before. The door was ajar as if waiting for me to enter. Inside, the weak light from my flashlight illuminated the dim objects. In the corner of the room, an old table with a few dusty pages lying around. I approached, and a strange feeling arose within me. One of the pages, although old and tattered, had strange characters, lines of text that I had never seen anywhere. Just as I bent down to read, I heard a creaking sound behind me. I turned around, the lights suddenly danced, and for a brief moment, I saw a faint figure, like a human being, standing right in front of the door. My heart jumped, and I jumped back. But it's just darkness. I can't understand. This house has a strange existence, as if it were alive, watching me. The whispers began to grow louder, echoing throughout the walls, no longer faint sounds. That voice was no longer a harmless whisper. They sounded like warnings, like pleas, as if someone had lived here and died a long time ago, and now they couldn't leave. The feeling that I wasn't the only one in this house grew stronger. I turned around and decided to go back into the hidden hallways I had discovered the day before. Once again, I touched the door hidden behind the large cabinet, and like before, the door opened again into a dark space. I could hear the whispers inside, clearer than ever. I walked in, this time the strange feeling was undeniable. Scratches on walls are not simply cracks. They were like symbols, faint symbols that I couldn't understand. The silence in that hidden hallway made me feel like I was in another world, a space where I didn't belong. I continued to go deeper, my footsteps echoing in the dark space. The air began to become cold and damp, as if this space had been lifeless for a long time. The strange markings on the wall gradually became clearer, as if they were guiding me along a path. Suddenly, I stopped. A soft sound, like a very close whisper, came from behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing. My heart pounded in my chest, and a strange feeling came back. I felt like something was standing behind me, but I couldn't see it. The air became heavy and choking. Suddenly, a loud noise rang out from deep in the darkness. I couldn't determine its origin, but I felt that something was moving, coming closer to me. My legs started shaking, and I couldn't take my eyes off the markings on the wall. I can't ignore them anymore. Each symbol is like a reminder, a message that I cannot understand. The whisper now became a moan, as if someone was calling to me from the end of the hallway. I couldn't help but walk towards it. Every step I echo, every sound in this dark space is like part of a secret that I cannot fully know. As I approached the end of the hallway, I saw a trapdoor, like a small hidden vault. I opened the door and walked down. The space down there is dark, damp and cold. I can feel a presence here, something watching me. The whispers kept echoing from the walls, and I could no longer ignore them. I felt like I was entering a deep place in this house, a place that it didn't want me to explore. The feeling of fear inside me increased as I walked down to the cellar. The air down here is especially cold, as if this space has been abandoned for a long time. Everything around me was silent, and the whispers faded away like a wave retreating into the deep darkness. I felt like I was entering a place that didn't belong to me, a place that was out of my control. I walked along the cold stone walls, the light from my flashlight illuminating only a few meters in front of me. The cracks on the wall are not just ordinary cracks, but they are like random lines drawn by an invisible hand. Strange symbols appeared, sometimes like ancient drawings, sometimes just irregular scratches, as if someone had used their fingernails to scratch the stone, leaving marks over the centuries. The strange feeling still stuck with me, making it impossible for me to focus on anything other than listening to the sound of my footsteps echoing in this dark space. I began to feel a change in the air. Suddenly, the air became heavier, as if something invisible was floating around me, enveloping me, as if it was pulling me into another world. I took a few more steps, and suddenly a very light sound rang out from behind, like a soft breath, warm but somehow unnatural. I turned around quickly, but saw only darkness. My heart was pounding in my chest. I certainly couldn't ignore that feeling. I felt like something, some creature, was watching my every step from the darkness. The whisper appeared again. This time, They weren't gentle sounds, but something pleading, as if someone was asking for help. But the strange thing is that I can't understand that language. Those whispers are not human voices. They sounded like the pleas of a soul left behind in this house, trapped and unable to escape. The voice was like a curse, as if this house was trying to remind me that I wasn't the first to come here and certainly wouldn't be the last. I couldn't help but feel a presence right behind me, as if someone was standing right there, watching me. I turned around again, only to see that the space around me was still empty, but the atmosphere was heavier than ever. I could even feel a cold wind blowing through my hair, even though there were no windows nearby. Once again, I continued walking, not daring to turn back again. I must continue to explore what lies ahead for me. The next few hallways led me to a small room with no windows, just an old wooden table and faded papers scattered on the table. The strange symbols and drawings seemed to be half buried under a layer of dust. I ran my hand through them, feeling each cold page as if it were sending me a silent message that I couldn't decipher. Just as I was studying those pages, a strong sound suddenly rang out from behind. I turned around, my flashlight scanning the dark space, and I saw a silhouette of a person, or at least a faint shape, standing just outside the door. I couldn't see the person's face clearly, only a blurry image, as if the person was standing in the dark but still trying to approach me. My heart stopped beating for a moment, but when I blinked again, the figure disappeared. There were only the sounds of my rapid breathing, hurried footsteps, and the strange whisper that kept echoing in my head. I no longer know where I am, or how much time has passed. Feelings of fear and curiosity mixed inside me, making me unable to leave this house, even though I was clearly aware that I was not the only one here. Suddenly, I heard another sound, a noise like breaking stone. I turned around, and now, I could see more clearly. One of the cracks in the wall wasn't just a crack anymore, it was widening, forming a large hole. From inside, I could see a completely different darkness, as if the hole was not part of the house, but a passage leading into another place, another dimension. The voice rang out again, this time clearer than ever. Just keep going. This house won't let you go. The voice in the darkness kept ringing, like an invitation for me to go deeper into the secret that this house was hiding. I can't stop. Even though my body trembled and my heart pounded, I still felt myself being drawn into the passage that the cracks created. Every step I took seemed to draw me closer into a darker and more dangerous place. I continued walking towards the hole in the wall, even though the cold feeling overwhelmed me and the air became heavier and heavier. The darkness seemed thicker, as if I were entering a world that was not human. I reached out to touch the wooden board nearby, feeling its coldness, but as soon as I touched it, a cold wind passed through my back, startling me. The whisper now turned into a strange sound, not breathing anymore but more like moans, weak sounds, as if someone was suffering, in pain and begging for release. But there was something so scary in that voice, as if it was trying to comfort me, luring me to continue entering. Every word sounded like a curse, an irresistible lure. As I walked through the hole in the wall, I couldn't help but notice another space inside. It wasn't a room, but a long hallway, curving in an arc as if it were leading me down to a lower floor. Inside, the light from my flashlight was just enough for me to see a few dusty chairs, a rotten wooden table, and cracks in the old tile floor. The walls around me had strange symbols carved in them that I couldn't explain. Sometimes they looked like ancient symbols, sometimes like erased traces, as if this house had witnessed mysterious rituals that no one dared to reveal. My footsteps became heavier and heavier, and every time I stopped to listen, I heard whispers echoing from deep in the darkness. Those noises are no longer a distraction. It was as if they were talking to me, with strange voices that I couldn't understand. But the strange thing was that I felt a strong urge, as if I was recognizing every word, even though I couldn't explain it. Then, for a moment, my flashlight flashed strangely, and I saw more clearly. A figure stood right in front of me. Not the silhouette of a human being, but a shadowy shape, without a face, just an indistinct body, as if it were created from the darkness itself. It stood there, silent, not moving, but I could feel that it was watching me, as if it had been waiting for me to come for a long time. Suddenly, a cold feeling ran down my spine, making it impossible for me to breathe. I tried to turn around to run, but my legs were frozen in place, unable to move. The whisper came again, this time clearer than ever, as if it was giving me an order. Don't go, don't come back. Just stay. The house needs you. But I can't bear it anymore. It felt like a presence was overwhelming me, an invisible force was pressing down on my body. I cannot fight it. My vision blurred, and I felt like I was falling into a hazy dream where I was no longer myself. Everything around me began to deform, the space changed as if this house was no longer a house but a living entity, something beyond imagination. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand, not human, but something invisible, touching my shoulder. I turned around, but saw only darkness. My eyes opened wide, but I couldn't see clearly. Strange sounds began to echo in my head again, as if the house was speaking to me, not through words, but through feeling, through every breath, every touch. Don't be afraid, just stay. I can't understand what's going on. But part of me, even though I was so scared that I couldn't breathe, felt a strange urge, as if I had to stay, had to know these secrets, had to explore them to the end. At that moment, a cold wind blew, and the house seemed to react to it. I heard a soft laugh, as if someone was pleased with my presence. This feeling, a strange connection to the house, made me even more confused. I can't get out, and I don't know if I want to get out or not. I can't move. Everything around me seemed to slow down, the dark space seemed to swallow everything, but I couldn't escape. A cold, heavy feeling enveloped my body, as if an invisible gravity was pulling me down into a bottomless pit. I felt the presence of that shadow, even though I couldn't see it clearly. My eyes were wide open, but I couldn't distinguish between what was real and what was an illusion. The whispering sounds in my head began to become confused, no longer gentle invitations. They were like broken moans, desperate pleas echoing in the dark space. I can't escape them, each word is like an invisible string tightly wrapped around my mind. That shadow still stood there, not moving, just watching me, as if waiting for something. A sudden coldness swept across my back. I turned around, and this time, I saw it more clearly. A solid black figure, no face, only blurry shapes. I wanted to run away, but my legs couldn't move. That shadow walked towards me, gently, step by step. Although I could feel its presence, I couldn't feel its physicality. It didn't touch me, but I clearly felt that it was closer to me than ever. Don't be afraid, said a voice in my head, not human words, but something else. It echoed like an echo, not through my ears but through another dimension. Just stay. This house is yours. Those words were like a temptation, like a pull, making me unable to resist. I want to run, I want to get out of here, but I can't. A feeling of fear began to spread throughout my body, but part of me felt like I had to stay, had to learn about this house, had to understand what was happening. My mind couldn't explain it, but my heart felt like it had a strange connection to the house, as if I were a part of it. Suddenly, a light laugh rang out from behind. I turned around, and this time I saw more clearly. The wall behind me is moving. The cracks in the wall seem to expand, opening up another passage. This door is not a normal door but a passage leading into another space, a space completely separate from the outside world. I could feel a cold air blowing from inside, and it felt like an invitation. This invitation cannot be refused. I walked towards that door, my steps were heavy, as if controlled by an invisible force. Every step I took seemed to draw me closer to destruction. I can't go back. Feelings of curiosity and fear made me enter, even though I knew that I was entering a dangerous land. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I immediately felt a strange change in the air. The space inside is a dark room, with no light, only an overwhelming cold feeling. It seemed like this house didn't want me to see everything clearly. The feeling that I was being watched grew stronger. Every step I take echoes like a warning. But I can't stop. A strange noise rang out from the corner of the room, startling me. The light from the flashlight passed by and I saw shadowy shapes, as if they were moving around me, but I couldn't make out their shape. They were too faint, too dark to distinguish. I walked towards it, each step echoing clearly in the quiet space. As I approached, a cold wind brushed against my skin, and I realized that I was not alone. Suddenly, a scream rang out in my head, not an outside sound, but an invisible feeling waiting from inside my heart. "Get out of here now." The scream rang out, shrill and full of fear. But I can't do it. I can't leave. A strong suction pulled me into the darkness, into the constant whispers echoing from everywhere. This house has begun to control me. It knows I'm here, and it doesn't want me to leave. I heard inexplicable sounds. Eerie noises, soft laughter and rapid breathing. Blurred figures began to appear, seemingly not human. I felt their presence, but couldn't see them clearly. "Don't leave," the voice said again, this time clearer than ever. "This house needs you. You will stay, right?" I can't stop. Even though I knew everything was going down a dangerous path, I was still drawn into the charm of the house. Every step I take in the dark makes me feel more and more like I'm embarking on a challenge with no return. The whispers became a roaring sound, as if 1,000 voices were echoing in my head, forcing me forward, not allowing me to retreat. The strange feeling became stronger and stronger. I not only felt the presence of an invisible force, but also something moving around me. Faint silhouettes, unclear shapes, they move in the dark space, as if this space contains not only the house but another dimension. It feels like an invisible force is pulling me into it. A cold wind blew again. I was startled and turned around. But I couldn't see anything but thick darkness. The space around me seemed to shrink more and more, and my every step echoed more and more in the still air. Every step seems to pull me closer to a point of no return. Suddenly, I felt a change in the air. The whispers were no longer tiny sounds, but became clear words, as if the house was talking directly to me. The words were strange, incomprehensible, but had a strange power that made me unable to leave. "It feels like I'm being led, as if this house has been waiting for me for a long time." I stopped for a moment, trying to regain my composure. But as soon as I stopped, I heard a loud noise from behind. Something is approaching. The feeling of fear was like a wave hitting me hard, making me stand motionless, unable to move. The darkness was so dense, like a monster swallowing space, that I couldn't see anything around me. But I feel that I am not alone. And then, out of the darkness, a door opened. Not an ordinary door, but a door with no hinges, no handle, just a hole in space. That door led into a dark room with nothing but rough stone walls. But the strange thing is, I can't get out of that door. It was like an invisible trap, as if this house was inviting me to enter. I entered that room. Inside, I felt a strange heat, something unnatural. The smell of mold, earth, and the long passage of time filled the air. Scratches on the wall are not ordinary scratches. They were like signs, ancient symbols, as if this house had witnessed rituals that humans could not understand. These scratches seemed to be alive. They seemed to want to tell me a story that I can't finish listening to. Suddenly, a soft noise rang out from behind, as if someone had just entered the room. I turned around, and for a moment, I saw a faint silhouette, just barely recognizable as a figure standing there, looking at me with unseen eyes. I am speechless. The figure moved towards me, and I couldn't resist its attraction. Every step I take feels like I'm caught in a spiral that I can't escape from. "This house will not let you go," said the voice in my head, this time not through words, but through a chill that ran down my spine. "You're here now, and you're never leaving." I wanted to turn around, wanted to run away, but my body couldn't move. I clearly felt the presence of something invisible standing near me. I could feel cold breath on my neck, and in the darkness, I couldn't tell what was real and what was an illusion. The shadowy figures seemed to move around me, as if they were looking at me, watching me, and not wanting me to leave. I walked through another door, a dark passage leading to another room, and the whispers started again. This time, they were not prayers anymore, but laughter, gentle laughter like an invitation. Go ahead, explore it all. This house won't let you go until you've seen it all. I can't resist anymore. It felt like an invisible force pulled me towards that dark room, into a space that I couldn't escape. Blurred figures moved around me, as if this house was telling me that I was a part of it, an inseparable part. With every step I take I get closer to something inexplicable, yet strangely fascinating. This house is not just an ordinary house. It lives, and so do I, a part of it, like a missing piece of the puzzle. And I can't go back, I can't stop, because I'm already part of this house. Oh, can't stop. This irresistible feeling was like a rushing stream that swept me away, leaving me unable to control myself. This house is not only inviting me to enter but is also overpowering me every step of the way. Every time I thought I could go back, the house closed the exit, like a trap had been set a long time ago, just waiting for me to enter. I continued walking into the darkness, each step echoing in the quiet space, but filled with anxiety. The whispers continued to echo in my head, this time they were no longer seductions. They turned into gasps, strange giggles that I couldn't explain. I'm starting to feel like I'm not the only one in this house. The shadowy figures around me seemed to be getting closer, moving in the darkness, but I couldn't see them clearly. The wall also seems to be changing. The cracks were no longer simple cracks, but they were like tears in space, as if they were opening a path into another world. A feeling of fear welled up inside me. The strange symbols on the wall seemed to move, as if they were living, breathing creatures that pulsed with my breathing. The scratches and markings on the wall began to combine, forming indistinguishable images, but I felt life in them. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise, a terrifying roar coming from deep inside the house. That sound startled me, my heart beat wildly. I couldn't tell if it was a real sound or just confusion in my head. But I know one thing for sure, this house doesn't want me to leave. The deeper I went, the more I felt figures around me. They were no longer shadowy figures but living creatures, something other than human. The dim light was not enough for me to see their shapes clearly, but I felt their presence, felt their eyes watching my every move. Don't be afraid, the voice said again, but this time not in my head but right in my ear. I turned around quickly, but didn't see anyone. However, I felt someone's cold breath almost touching my skin. Just keep going. You won't get out. That urge is irresistible. I felt like I was being carried away by an invisible force. This house is controlling me, making me keep going deeper, moving towards secrets I never imagined. I can't remember how long I've been gone, I only know that I'm being pulled into another space, a space that doesn't belong to me. Suddenly, I saw a dim light sparkling from the end of the hallway. I headed towards it, even though I didn't want to, even though I felt that it was where I would find the answer, but it might also be a place I would never return to. As I approached, I realized it was a room. But unlike any room I've ever seen. There were no windows, no furniture, just a blank wall. On the wall, strange symbols and scratches were deeply engraved. They were like words, messages that I couldn't read, but had a strange feeling, as if they were looking at me, as if they were speaking to me. Suddenly, I felt a cold air flow from the wall. The scratches on it began to move, opening a new crack, a strange door leading into a deeper, darker space. I can't go back anymore. An irresistible urge forced me to move towards it. As soon as I walked through the door, a strong wind blew past, plunging me into darkness. I couldn't see anything but the dense darkness, but I felt every breath, every movement of the creatures around me. They are not humans, they are invisible creatures, ghosts trapped in this house. They are approaching me, step by step. And I can't run, I can't escape. This house, with all its secrets, is holding me back, not letting me go. You can't escape, the voice said again, this time no longer a whisper but a loud laugh, a haunting laugh. You have become a part of this house. You will stay with us forever. The dark night covers the house, but the space is still not as quiet as it seems. The feeling of tension did not lessen as I stood facing the mirror in the hallway. My eyes couldn't leave my reflection, and I felt like it was looking back at me, but not in the way I wanted. This time, when I stood in front of the mirror, I no longer felt as calm as before. Every beat of my heart rang clearly in my ears, and cold sweat began to pour out from my back. I looked into my eyes, as if checking to see if the reflection was what I thought it was. But whenever I blinked, I realized that the reflection didn't match perfectly. It always has a weird delay, like it's a beat behind me. My heart started pounding, and I felt my breathing become difficult. My reflection in the mirror was still standing there, looking at me without blinking. Its eyes seemed to say something that I couldn't understand. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze brush against my skin, and I looked in the mirror, startled. At this moment, my reflection was no longer standing still. His eyes suddenly lit up, and I couldn't believe my eyes when he started smiling. That smile is not my smile. My lips were still pressed tightly, but my reflection was grinning, a strange and cold smile. I couldn't believe my eyes, I couldn't explain this. The strangeness of my reflection made me feel like I was facing another version of myself, one I didn't know about. I stepped back, and as I did, I noticed that my reflection was no longer moving with me. It was still standing there, staring at me, the smile still on its face. I felt fear spread throughout my body. I want to leave, but I can't. I couldn't leave that mirror, couldn't escape my own gaze. I went back to the bedroom, my heart beating wildly in my chest. The atmosphere in the room also seemed stuffy, as if I was being watched from every direction. The thoughts of my reflection still haunt me, unable to be erased. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my strange smile in the mirror, and a cold feeling enveloped me. The next night, I decided to face this again. I know that I cannot live forever with this obsession. I can't live in this fear forever. The mirror was the cause, and I had to face it. This time, I stood in front of the mirror with a strange feeling, as if I had been dragged into a trial with no way out by this house. My eyes were still looking at myself in the mirror, and I tried to blink calmly. But this time, my reflection was no longer just tardy. It begins to move independently. I stopped blinking and noticed that the image in the mirror had changed. It started moving differently, and I couldn't understand it. A strange movement, a cold look from myself, made me feel like I was being controlled by some force. "Don't look at me," I whispered in the dark, but my reflection didn't stop. It just smiled, as if it was mocking me, as if it knew that I couldn't escape this strange urge. I couldn't escape looking at myself in the mirror. Every night, this obsession increased, and I felt like I was sinking deeper into an uncontrollable spiral. Even though I tried to get rid of it, my reflection in the mirror constantly clung to my mind. I began to sense that this house was not only occupying me through whispers, but also through strange images reflected in shiny surfaces. Every time I passed by the mirror, I felt a change in the air, as if someone was looking at me from behind. And it wasn't someone, but another version of me, an out-of-sync self, like a ghost watching me whenever I wasn't paying attention. This strange feeling makes me unable to feel secure in this house. I couldn't shake the fear I felt. Every time I blink, it slows down a beat, but it's not mine. This time, I decided not to avoid it anymore. I had to face my reflection again, even though I felt like I was entering a nightmare with no way out. I stood before the mirror in the hallway, my eyes never leaving my own image. The eyes in the mirror looked back at me, but they didn't look like mine. I could feel a change in it, a strange change, as if I was no longer the only one standing before this mirror. Suddenly, I blinked, and this time there was no delay in movement. The image in the mirror was not just my reflection, but it began to change. The eyes in the mirror were no longer looking at me. They looked into another dimension, into something I couldn't see. And then, like a strong shock, my reflection smiled. But that smile is not mine. The smile in the mirror is not a friendly smile. It was a cold, ghostly smile, as if it was mocking me. And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just me looking into the mirror, it was it, the self in the mirror, that was looking at me. I felt a coldness deep down my spine. It felt like I had been pulled into another world, a world from which I could not escape. I can't move. My eyes just stared at my reflection, and that smile grew wider. Suddenly, I heard a whisper, not from the mirror, but from inside my head. "Don't run," the voice said, deep and cold. "You can't escape me. You'll stay here forever." My heart pounded loudly in my chest. Cold sweat broke out, but I couldn't move. My reflection in the mirror continued to look at me, unblinking, and I felt like an invisible force was pulling me towards it. It wanted me to stay with it, in this strange space. And I can't escape it. I felt like an invisible string was pulling me closer to the mirror, as if I was trapped in my own gaze. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise from behind. A cold wind blew, and I turned around, but there was nothing there. There was only empty space, as if this house was keeping all its secrets in the dark. I felt like something was watching me from those shadows, but I couldn't see. When I turned to look in the mirror again, I saw a strange change. The image in the mirror is no longer me. It was a blurry figure, with no face and no clear shape. But I know one thing for sure, it wasn't me. It was something else, something I couldn't understand. Its eyes looked at me, not my eyes, but the eyes of something deep, a cold, empty look. Fear welled up inside me. I want to escape, but I can't. I want to leave, but I can't. This feeling, the feeling of being pulled and held, makes me unable to let go. And in that moment, I realized that this house had taken me. I became a part of it, a part of the secrets it held tightly. The feeling of fear continued to follow me, and it wasn't just fear of the dark or strange silhouettes, but of an invisible presence that I couldn't escape. That shadow followed me, not only inside the house, but also outside. Every time I moved, it was always there, right next to me, moving slowly, as if waiting for me to return. I tried to go somewhere far away, away from home, away from everything that had happened. But it seems impossible. The station was deserted and quiet, with only a few people walking around, but I couldn't feel comfortable. The shadow had followed me here, lying silently on the concrete, but every time I glanced, it moved, even if just a little. The shadow, which had no discernible shape, had a strong presence that I could not ignore. It feels like I'm running away from myself, but I can't escape. It has no owner, no controller, it just follows me, quietly and non-stop. As I stood near the tracks, I heard the train approaching, felt its rumbling noise. The wind blew my shirt, but the shadow was still there, almost right next to me, moving slowly as if reacting to my every move. When the train passed, I stood there alone. I thought I might be the only one left, but the shadow continued to follow me, as if it never wanted to leave. I turned around, and felt a blast of cold air from behind. The shadow was getting closer, sliding after me, getting closer and closer. I couldn't see directly, but I felt that presence right behind me. I didn't dare turn back, didn't dare face it, because I knew if I did, I would see even worse things. My steps were unsteady, I felt like I was running away from my own shadow. A cold feeling welled up inside me, as if I was stuck between two worlds, between darkness and light, between reality and illusion. I tried to run, but every step I took seemed to make the shadow follow me closer. I quickly left the station, got into my car, but when I looked down at the passenger seat, I saw that shadow again, still there, looming in the darkness. I turned on the light, but the shadow didn't disappear. It just changed position, always following me, like an invisible shadow that I couldn't escape. When I got home, I felt more and more tired, not only because of the long trip, but because of the fear that was growing inside me. The shadow is not just a reflection in the mirror, but it has become a part of me, an inseparable part. No matter what I do, that shadow is always there, always following me, always waiting for me to face it. I don't know how much longer I can endure it. I tried everything, tried to chase it away, but every time I looked down, it was there again. Every time I thought I was free of it, it came back. I can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is an illusion. The house, the mirror, the shadow, all seem to have blended together, as if they were a part of me, an inseparable part. I had nowhere to run. The shadow was chasing me not only in space but also in my mind. It knows me, and I know it. But there's one thing I'm sure of, I can't escape it. It has become a part of me, and I will never escape it. Before I realized what was happening, I felt a change in the air. My flashlight seemed to shine more dimly, the weak light making the space around me dense and dim. Even though I turned around and aimed the light at each corner, I couldn't make out anything. I felt a cold feeling in my chest, as if the air around me was becoming heavy, an invisible presence permeating the space. I continued looking into the mirror, but this time, my reflection was no longer myself. My eyes in the mirror no longer looked at me. They looked out, as if looking into another world, and then they gradually moved, turning towards me. I can't breathe. My eyes couldn't move away from the image in the mirror. My hands trembled as I raised them to touch my face. But in the mirror, my hand never touched my face. Instead, it moved through the air, as if another hand was there, a hand that wasn't mine. I felt a cold take over my body, as if I was being controlled by someone, as if I was no longer my own master. Suddenly, a strong shiver ran down my spine as I saw a shadow, shadowy and unidentifiable, gradually forming in the mirror, right behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one. There was only empty space, but my reflection in the mirror still stood there, silent and staring at me. Unable to bear it any longer, I stepped back, but the reflection in the mirror moved with me, as if it were following my every step. It's not just an ordinary image anymore. It had become something alive, with a will of its own, as if there was an entity inside it, an entity trying to find a way out. I turned around and looked at my reflection, but this time, I didn't see myself. I saw another face, a face I didn't recognize, with empty eyes staring back at me. A whisper rang out from the mirror, soft and husky, but full of menace. "Run," the voice said, "but don't think it will end. It will follow you everywhere, never letting go." My heart was pounding in my chest. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and I felt an indescribable fear. I turned around and ran out of the attic, slamming the door behind me. But that whisper still echoed in my ears, as if I couldn't escape it. My steps were hurried, but each step made me feel an invisible presence watching me. I turned around to look, and that shadow was still there. It moves in the dark, from corner to corner, always following me, always ready to appear at the moments I least expect it. I returned home, but I couldn't feel peace anymore. The shadow not only followed me in space, but it seemed to have invaded my mind. Every moment I lived carried that threat. Shadows and strange reflections constantly reminded me that I was no longer the only one in this house. I tried to leave, to find peace somewhere else, but I felt like it would always follow me, like a shadow that couldn't leave. Every time I look in the mirror, I see that shadow, waiting, quietly watching, like an entity that wants to possess me, that wants to merge with me. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. It was like I was trapped in an inescapable vortex, between darkness and light, between truth and illusion. And I know, one day, I will have to face that shadow, my own shadow, no longer a reflection, but a living entity waiting. As I positioned the camera, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was doing something wrong, as if there was an intrusion into my own space that I couldn't control. Still, curiosity overcame fear and I decided to experiment. I need to know, and I need proof that there is no one here but me. That night, I lay in bed, so stressed that I couldn't sleep. The room was too quiet, only the gentle rustling of the fan. I tried to put myself to sleep, but the feeling of something watching me couldn't go away. The dim light from the TV screen shines onto the ceiling, creating undulating silhouettes. I closed my eyes but couldn't stop thinking about the mirror in the attic and the strange symbols carved into it. The sound of chanting still echoed in my mind, as if it never left. The next morning, I woke up and immediately checked the camera. Really unbelievable. On the screen, I saw my image, sitting at the table, reading my diary. But what gave me goosebumps was the reflection in the mirror. Suddenly, I realized that the image in the mirror did not match my movements. The eyes in the mirror stared at me, slowly and strangely. The hand in the mirror moved a beat slower than mine. My lips were pursed, but in the mirror, it was smiling coldly. A cold feeling ran down my spine when I realized there was no one else in the room but me, but in the mirror there was another person, another entity staring at me. It's not me, but it's strangely similar to me. I couldn't move, my body felt frozen. Too scared, I decided to stop watching and turn off the camera screen. But the memories of the image in the mirror kept haunting me. I can't explain it. I know what I have to do, but I don't know where to start. The only thing I'm sure of is, the shadow, the image in the mirror is not mine. It was something else, something that had entered this space with me, waiting for its chance to claim me. Since then, I stayed away from the bedroom. I didn't dare go near the desk or any reflective surface. But no matter what I do, I can't stop the feeling that it's still watching me. Long nights, when the house falls silent, I can hear low, hoarse whispers from somewhere, right next to my ear, calling my name. Stopped, and I knew it wasn't a coincidence anymore. Gradually, the scratching sound on the wall became clearer and closer, as if something was approaching me little by little. Every night, the sound echoed, like a slow journey from a distant spot within the walls, along dark corridors. I no longer had the courage to imagine what was making those sounds. I started avoiding the walls, even the dark corners of the room. It felt like they were watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. One night, as I sat working late, I felt a cold wind blowing through the room even though the windows were closed. The ceiling light began to flicker, and I saw a shadowy figure moving in the corner of the room, near the dark area inside the closet. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt my breathing stop. I tried to turn my head away, but I couldn't take my eyes off that shadow. It stood still, then suddenly moved, as if an entity was trying to sneak around corners in the dark. I quickly stood up, but when I looked back, the shadow was no longer there, only a heavy silence prevailed. I started to feel like I was being forced into a tight space, a world I couldn't escape from. Unable to bear it any longer, I decided to leave the company late one night. The feeling of safety is gradually fading, and I just want to get out of this place. But as soon as I got into the car, the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. I looked around, and in the rearview mirror, I saw a blurry figure standing outside, not sure who it was, just a blurry shape, no face. It stood there silently, as if waiting for me. My heart beat fast, and I hurriedly drove out of that area. But it cannot be denied that that presence still haunts me. Even if I leave that place, that feeling will never leave. I started to feel like I wasn't myself anymore. Everything around me became blurred, as if covered by a layer of fog, and I couldn't see clearly anymore. When I got home, I tried not to think about all that had happened. But when I entered the house, I noticed something strange. The diary has disappeared from where I hid it. A chill ran through me as I realized that something in the house had moved, without my knowledge. It felt like a cold wind blowing through my throat. I tried to breathe evenly, but my heart was pounding and I couldn't stop. I turned around to walk out of the bathroom, but when I opened the door, I saw a faint figure, like a shadow, standing outside the door. My heart seemed to stop beating. That's not a real person. It was an indistinct shadow, moving back and forth, as if watching me. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, telling myself that maybe it was just a reflection of the light from the lamp, but it felt so real. I felt goosebumps on my skin and my body began to tremble. I walked quickly out of the bathroom, trying not to look back. But when I turned around, I realized there was no more, only empty space. At this point, I didn't think about anything anymore, I just wanted to leave there as quickly as possible. I quickly went outside and saw the pickup truck had already left. My heart was still pounding in my chest, I couldn't calm down. These strange feelings cannot be explained by reason. Even though I tried to avoid it, that figure still followed me. I didn't dare turn around to look in the mirror, nor did I dare let myself feel that strange presence. But as I drove home, fatigue couldn't seem to dispel the strange images in my head. I can't control my anxiety, because I know that image will always appear every time I think about it, every time I stop to breathe. Maybe I can't hide forever. I don't know how much longer I can live in this fear, but I also can't forget what I've been through. Am I stuck in a vicious cycle with no way out? I feel like I'm losing the ability to distinguish between reality and illusion. In the end, I can only hope that everything will end, or that I will find a way to cope with it, but at this point, I'm not sure about anything anymore. Don't turn back, but my feet feel stuck to the ground, unable to move. I stood there, flashlight still pointed at the tree trunk, my eyes never leaving the spot where I had just seen the shadow pass. The air around me suddenly became stuffy, as if the space was shrinking, suffocating me little by little. Again, the whisper rang out, this time clearer, right behind me. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't dare turn around, but I felt, there was something there, right behind me. The shadow I saw wasn't just a blurry shape anymore, it was like a living creature, waiting, watching me. I felt cold on my skin, I couldn't move my hands, as if something was grabbing me from behind. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't run away. I couldn't let myself be scared anymore, otherwise I wouldn't be able to get out. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the flashlight, and stepped forward. But each step I took seemed to last forever, and I felt that presence again, that darkness moving with me. Strange sounds continued to echo around, whispers, light footsteps, but no one could be seen. I feel like something is still following me, always there, always watching, no matter how fast I try to walk. The shadow in the forest seemed to be moving quietly with me, but no one could hear or see it. It hides in the darkness, waiting until I have no strength to fight anymore. And then, when I started to feel tired and helpless, I realized that I had gone too far and couldn't find a way out. The path has now become narrow, as if this forest wants to hold me back, not letting me escape. I couldn't turn back, because I knew that presence would be waiting for me there, waiting for me to get close. Fear welled up inside me, and I felt like I was falling into a vicious cycle with no way out. When I looked at the sky through the trees, I felt like I no longer belonged to this world, and the whispers were pulling me out of reality, deeper into a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. Equal, but that feeling doesn't stop. At that moment, I felt a heavy feeling invade my body, as if I was sitting in a chair that was not simply an object, but a trap that had been prepared a long time ago. I tried to move from the chair, but the armrest was as tight as if trying to hold me back, like an invisible force was pulling me into a space I couldn't escape from. The soft hiss of the wood under my weight made me stiffen, as if the chair was groaning under my presence. A strange feeling spread through me, as if the grain of the wood was changing, as if this chair wasn't just an old piece of furniture, but part of something larger, darker, and I couldn't quite see it all. Before I could recover, I felt a gentle whisper, like a wave passing through my ears, but so sharp that it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Come here with me. That voice did not belong to anyone else, but the chair itself, as if it wanted to invite me into a deep place that I couldn't refuse. I left that chair immediately, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just touched something that was not of this world. The chair is no longer an object, it is a gateway, a trap, something that has existed for a long time and waited for me to come, to take me into a dark area where there is no escape. I walked out of the living room, and now, looking back, I realized that the chair has changed. It was no longer as simple as it was at first, but more like a living creature. The cracks in the wood were like eyes, intently watching my every step. Even if I leave it, I still feel the chair's eyes watching me from afar, constantly reminding me that I haven't left it yet. That feeling followed me into every room in the apartment, and I no longer felt safe. Every corner, every wall, everything in this house seems to be infected with something dark. I couldn't escape, couldn't stop, as that darkness slowly invaded, no matter how hard I tried to run away. I don't know if the chair started all of this, but the feeling that there was a presence watching me never went away. Rough, the Abram iron candle lamp has nothing special to the naked eye. It is not a beautiful item, nor is it the precious antique I imagined. But once I put it in place, I felt a change in the air. There seemed to be something heavy in the room, as if this candle was not just an object but an object carrying some power, an indefinable presence. Since then, every night I sat in the living room, the light of the iron lamp seemed to have a strange contraction from the air, casting shadows on the walls, creating strange shapes, sometimes light and sometimes dark, as if something not of this world was living in my house. I thought about getting rid of it, but part of me couldn't leave it. It was a feeling of something waiting, as if I was just part of a longer story, one I didn't fully understand yet. When I looked at it, I felt like I was being watched. And not only the armchair, but also that iron lamp began to change. Even though it was just an insignificant object, it began to take over my space. I couldn't shake the feeling that it might be a guide to the unexplained. Every time I tried to look out the window, it seemed like I could feel its eyes from behind, from the chair or from the iron lamp. They kept watching me, waiting for me to return to continue the wordless conversation. Since I brought these items home, I have not been myself. Everything has changed. And I don't know if I will find peace or live forever with this feeling of being watched. Now, I don't dare leave the living room for long, and sometimes when the light dims, I just sit there, staring at the chair and the lamp, hoping that it won't change again. But I know, one day, I will have to face it. Painting, feeling the faint vibrations under my hand, I could hear my own breathing as I stood there. The dim light enveloped the space, creating an odd feeling in the space around me. Every time I leave and come back, the picture looks different. The trees in there seem to move slightly, as if they were whispering something, even though there was no one there but me. I began to feel unable to escape the painting. It seemed to be holding me back, creating a claustrophobic and eerie feeling. It was not the feeling of artistic peace that I usually think about, but of tension, as if this painting were not just a lifeless object, but a door to another world, a world I had no control over. Every time I look at the picture, I feel that change. The light around the tree is no longer foggy like before. Now it has strange colors, like a faint beam of light piercing the night, and sometimes I feel as if eyes are looking at me from within, as if the painting is watching me, waiting for me to come closer. I tried to avoid looking at it, but every time I passed by the hallway, I felt its presence. It was like something was clinging to me, waiting for me to face it again. I don't know if I can continue living in this apartment with it, because every night when I turn off the lights, I feel it watching me, and I can't stop thinking about it. There were times when I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt like there was movement in the painting, a slight change that I couldn't explain. I began to feel scared when I went into the living room, and even when I tried to sleep, I couldn't escape the feeling that the painting was still there, waiting for me to return. Sometimes I imagine myself walking into the room, standing across from the painting and looking at those trees. They will look back at me, they will follow my every move, and I know that I cannot avoid them forever. My world has now been changed, and the painting is proof of that. I have a way out. The feeling of being imprisoned in my own space, with that painting always watching and waiting, made me unable to stop being afraid. Even though I placed it face down on the floor, the feeling didn't go away. Every time I passed the living room, I felt an insidious presence, an inexplicable presence, like someone or something was standing there waiting for me. Really, I couldn't understand why I felt this way, why a painting could have such a strong effect on me. Maybe it was just a product of stress and excessive fatigue, but I couldn't deny that I didn't feel comfortable every time I looked at it. Strangely enough, even though the painting was placed face down on the floor, I still felt a strong attraction from it. There are times when I think that if I don't dare touch it, if I can't look straight at it, then I can make it go away, or at least reduce that feeling of fear. I tried leaving the apartment, but when I returned, everything was still the same. It's still there, as if nothing happened. And I wonder if I can continue to live in this apartment, with that painting, with the feeling that there is always something watching me, waiting for me. I don't know what will happen if I don't face it, but there is a part of me that feels that if I don't do something now, things will only get worse. The feeling that the painting was still there, not an ordinary piece of furniture but an object with strange power, was sucking me in, not letting me go. If you feel something strange and unexplainable, don't rush to throw that feeling away. Sometimes, we cannot find reasons or explanations for what is happening in life, but our feelings are always valid. We all have moments where insecurity, fear, or strangeness force us to confront ourselves. And sometimes, facing strange things, whether scary or not, is the only way for us to better understand ourselves and the world around us. Remember, in any situation, you are never alone. Everything, no matter how scary it may seem, is just part of the journey. Don't hesitate to seek support if you feel you need it. And no matter what, you always have the ability to overcome. Strength does not come from not being afraid, but from continuing to move forward, whether we feel afraid or not. Wishing you always be strong and wise in your decisions. Now have a good night's sleep.